Last week, I attempted Noah Kagan's 48-hour $1 million weekend challenge, all with the goal to determine if my startup idea had the potential to become a profitable business. What I want to do in this video is really just cover the things that I learned, the mistakes that I felt like I made, and really just try to answer the question, does this ultimately make sense for you to try as well? If you're new here, hey, I'm Chase. I'm a software engineer with 8 years experience in the field. As of recent, I'm really just documenting from day one my process as I go down this new path of trying to build my own SaaS business while maintaining a full-time job. All right, now let's dive into it. First up, what is this $1 million weekend challenge and where does it come from? Well, it comes from Noah Kagan's recent book labeled $1 Million Weekend, which is really just about getting out there and giving you actionable steps to start building your own software business. Now, if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. It has a ton of great advice and really just gives you a great outline for the initial steps and eventually how to scale and grow as you continue down this path. And one of the main takeaways I got from this book, and it's pretty much just like the name of it since that's the title of the book, which is this weekend 48-hour challenge, which is all about, can you get 3 people to pay you for an idea before you actually build it? And what I love about this is that it's real hard evidence that people are willing to pay for a problem that you're trying to solve. And that's kind of the name of the game with this book, is to just take the leap and take action on the certain things that hold you back from actually moving forward with building a successful business. And the first step is to create your 1-minute business plan, which is really just to validate if your idea can actually scale into a profitable business that can generate a significant amount of income. And it's pretty straightforward. It's called the 1-minute plan for a reason, because all you really do is just like look at your Google Trends for certain keywords about your business, see if it's a rising or just neutral market, which is good. You don't want to be going into like a newspaper business, because you'll see that within Google Trends, it's probably trending down, which means that you're kind of just in a dying market. So it's really just a gut check of, are you in a growing market, or are you in a market that has the potential to just sustain itself long term? And then the second aspect is to determine just your price and how many people you have to sell to. So for example, if you're shooting for $10,000 a month, and your product is being sold for $100, how many people do you have to sell to? Well, 100 people. So it's quick math just to determine 1, your market size, and 2, how many people do you have to reach at a certain price point to start making the amount that you strive to make. So I got through that phase pretty quickly, and that was kind of just the standard stuff of like outlining, researching, kind of the stuff I'm used to. But afterwards is where it got really hard for me, because now I had to actually call people and talk about my idea and see if it was going to solve problems that they had. And this is where I really felt like I had to get out of my comfort zone. I had to go out and like call people just to see if like, hey, would you buy what I'm trying to sell? Basically doing cold call sales. And I'm a software engineer, like I mentioned. This is not in my blood or anything that I feel like I'm confident in doing, but I wanted to hold true to the challenge and really try to determine, can I get people to buy this idea that I had? So that's what I set out to do. I really just went through my contact list, found roughly 10 people that I felt like would be a potential good fit as a prospect for this idea I was working on, and wrote down their contact info and prepped to call them. And that's really the meat of this challenge, which was to get out there, get uncomfortable, and really just interact with people and get feedback on your idea and see, 1, is there potential, and if not, what would have potential. And so for my actual results, at the end of the day, I had called 8 people. I had 1 person just never pick up. I had 4 people give me a maybe, or just basically a no, honestly. And I had, drumroll, 3 people actually Venmo me for this idea on the spot for a grand total of $30. So yeah, I didn't make much. I got $30, but it still felt really good. I had 1 person Venmo me $5, another gave me 15, and the last person gave me $10. So I was able to generate some income. I got my first sales for this idea that I was essentially just talking about, which felt really good. That was completely out of my comfort zone. I had never done this before, but I realized that 1, it is possible for me to do, and 2, I was potentially onto something with this concept that I have, which in my head is this AI pre-sale landing page builder to help people quickly validate their ideas before they build something. So I got 3 people to pay me, which did feel great. But I think there is an underlying thing from going through this process that was a little bit more beneficial, which was out of all of the calls, I was able to actually get some really good product feedback in terms of what direction to take this and also what market to target. Kind of just to take this back a little bit, I was initially thinking this idea was kind of like a landing page builder where non-technical folks would be able to go onto the site, type in a prompt, and then get a landing page generated for them so that they could go ahead and try to validate their idea. And that felt cool, but from the calls, what I noticed was that there is this desire for actually technical people to get to market faster for these ideas that they had. And the unique part was that they didn't necessarily want a tool to do it all for them. They wanted this tool to actually generate code on their behalf and then download that so that they could use it as kind of their starting point, get them roughly 80, 90% of the way there, and then they can do what they want with it, modify it, and host it wherever they want. And that got me really thinking. That was not something that I had initially thought of, but I was like, that would be cool. As an engineer myself, I was like, yeah, I usually don't like landing page builders that don't show me the code. I want that code and I want to modify it myself to make it my own. But there's so much that goes into just getting it 80% of the way that I'm totally fine with having a tool do for me. And so that's where I ended up landing was, I pivoted a bit. There was a signal within the calls that I had for actually technical people to have something that they can use to generate code and speed up the process of creating landing pages. And that was just one example. I had also learned maybe there's a way to use website images or actual URLs to get inspiration to create a page that feels like one. I got a lot of just solution-based feedback outside of the actual payment for the idea that helped shape the direction of it that I'm working on now. And that leads into the learnings and some of the mistakes that I felt like I made after just reflecting on doing this process for myself. So the first learning is that you're gonna have to get out of your comfort zone and push yourself to build a profitable business. I think it's something that's really hard, and I've talked about it before, that just we all default to what we're good at and what we're comfortable with, but building a business requires so many skills outside of what you already know, and it's really critical that if you're going this path alone or even just with a single co-founder, that you have to push yourself and actually get out of your comfort zone and do the other things that are really important. In this case, for me, it's reaching out, calling, talking with people, getting insights from an actual prospect. I feel like I got some really valuable information from the calls that I had, which really just reinforces that even though it's scary and it's stuff that I don't necessarily want to do, it's really important to do it. And something that I encourage everyone else to do is look at the things that you're kind of pushing aside or ignoring or making excuses for why you're not going to do it. Really just that concept of eat the frog, just go at it and do the uncomfortable thing, and it's going to give you a lot of benefits in the long run as you continue to work on your own business. Now, the next thing that I learned, which was really just from listening back to the calls that I had done, which was I was not good at this process. And something that I had learned about afterwards, which was called the mom test, which is really just if you're talking to people that know about you or just in human nature, you don't want to put people down for the most part. If someone comes to you and they're like, hey, what do you think of this? 9 times out of 10, most people will be like, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I like it, whatever, something like that. Give you a positive indication that, oh, I'm onto something. But that's what this mom test is about, is where when you present something, people are gonna be your cheerleader. They're gonna want you to do well, even if they might not pay for it, or there might not actually be value in it. People just wanna give you kind of a positive feedback. What you want to be doing, and it's what I didn't really do, was asking open-ended questions and not talking about your solution whatsoever. So maybe towards the end of the conversation, when you're actually trying to validate will people pay for it, that's when you can talk about the solution. But 80, 90% of the conversation should just be open-ended questions, and you should be doing less talking. One of my friends gave a really good quote of, you're doing well if you're not talking. And that's something that I learned. Once I got nervous on a call, I would just go right to talking about the solution that I was building, and That was a mistake. What I needed to do instead was focus on asking questions like, tell me about doing this process. And then kind of probing at that answer that they give and seeing, do they eventually come to the realization that, yeah, this is a problem that I have. And if it is, that's when you can then talk about, hey, what would you pay to have this solved for you? Again, you're not mentioning what you're doing. You're really just trying to gauge, will people pay for a certain problem? So that's a learning that I'm gonna take going forward, is really just making sure I'm asking open-ended questions and listening a lot, and just trying to make the conversation more about the person that I'm talking with and hearing their unopinionated just responses about the questions that I ask. The next thing is feedback is so valuable. Like, if I just reflect a minute and look back at the initial idea I had, the chances of me making something that people wanted or would find valuable are super small. Just over the course of 48 hours, I was essentially able to come up with a new direction and new product solution, really, for how to go about this problem space that I didn't think about before. It was just through this process and these calls that I was on to determine that, oh, there is something here, and it actually looks like this. Like, people would find this valuable, not necessarily what you're talking about before, but this part. So that was some really valuable learning, and just the importance of feedback. Like, I'm gonna keep trying to find ways to get feedback as much as possible. Like, as founders, we can have great ideas and see kind of a product vision down the line, but we need to gather that customer feedback on that concept before moving forward so that we know we're on the right direction. And that kind of ties into the last thing that I learned, which was like, your first idea is probably a failure. Honestly, the thing that you think in your head that's gonna be this great idea, once you get it into the real world and open it up to feedback, you're gonna find something else that is where the actual value is. And so I think it's important that you really just get out there and share your ideas, because if you don't, you're gonna be stuck in your head in terms of, oh, like, I think it should be doing this, or I think that this should work in this certain way. When in reality, you have people that you can call or chat with in some way to give you real feedback on what would actually be valuable to them. So in the end, looking back at this challenge and determining would I do it again, I think the answer is yes. And I think that every entrepreneur, solo founder, someone with a co-founder, doesn't matter. If you're at the very beginnings of building a business, this challenge can be really beneficial in helping push you down a certain path that you might not have uncovered before. But the important thing is that it's not an end-all answer, and it's not foolproof. That means like you're going to succeed if you complete the challenge. For example, like, I had gotten my 3 sales. They were small, but I did get them. Does that mean that I'm going to build a successful business? No, there's so much execution between this concept that I now have and where I can get it that really determines the end result and the success rate of this idea. What this challenge is really great at, though, is just giving you the general direction to head in. So before, I was kind of just shooting in the dark, it felt like. Felt like I could just pick anything and go with it, and I really didn't know if there was any weight of value behind what I was gonna work on. And within a few days, essentially, I was able to determine, okay, there is potential in this area. The product's probably still going to pivot a lot between now and a few months from now, but it's heading in the right direction. And that's really the key, is that you have something that when you've talked about it, it was valuable enough to pay for. But just because you're able to do that with 3 people does not mean that you have a successful business just yet. And honestly, I had more questions than answers at the end of it. I was like, oh, well, what about this and this? But that's part of the process. That's what I think most of these very early stages are about, is doing those interviews and just repeating the process and building something a little bit and then showing that to people and then iterating more. It's that whole iterative process that I think really drives a startup to product market fit. But until then, you're never really going to feel like you have something worth it. You're just gonna know, like, I'm heading in the right direction for the most part. So yeah, it's a bare bones starting point and it gives you a great foundation, but you can't then just take that feedback from that one weekend and then go off for 3 months and try to build a solution hoping that you're going to hit the mark. It's important to just use it as a starting point and then make sure that you continue to do what you did that weekend over and over and over as you move forward with building your startup. But outside of that tactical stuff, I think you also learn a lot of things just about yourself, you know, what you're good at, what you kind of struggle with, and it really forces you to get out of that comfort zone. And you have that timeline, you have a deadline, you have a very tangible goal. So you're going to do what it takes to get there. And then afterwards, kind of like what I'm doing now, is you get to reflect and iterate on your own just personal process and how you conduct certain things. I learned a lot about just those initial phone interviews and realized I did a lot of things wrong. So I can now take that and learn from it and make it better for the next time. But it's stuff that I wouldn't have been able to know that I'm doing without doing it in the first place. So yeah, the challenge is all about taking action and just reflecting afterwards on what worked for your business and what worked for your process and how can you make it better. And if you want to see more in depth what this challenge was really like for me, be sure to click this video where I captured the actual day-to-day of going through the challenge and some of those, I would say, embarrassing phone calls. Be sure to check it out.